Oh, hey there! So it's the mid-90s, and you've got the idea to turn your incredibly popular platforming video game hero into a hit RPG. So what do? Well, in Nintendo's case, Shigeru Miyamoto sat down with Squaresoft, a company well-versed in creating numerous hit RPGs. Conveniently, at the same time, they had a desire to create an RPG that could do better outside of Japan. And who better to appeal to a Western audience than Mario? That's right, this is just another video about Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. By 1994, Mario had already been dominating platforming gaming, but he'd also already branched out into other genres as well. There were puzzle titles such as Dr. Mario, racing with Super Mario Kart, art with Mario Paint, and numerous educational titles. It was only a matter of time before the denim-clad lad made the jump into RPGs. On paper, it doesn't seem like role-playing games and Super Mario should really work, but like pineapple on pizza, they absolutely do. Fight me, haters. According to an interview with Shihiro Fujioka, the game's director, it all started early in 1994, during a business meeting between Nintendo and Squaresoft, quoted as saying, "The topic came up of us working on something together. Nintendo had Mario, and Square had RPGs. Well, why not simply stick the two together? Being entirely different things, we had no idea how this would turn out, but that's actually what made it so exciting." Square actually ended up taking the lead on the project, with many of the basic ideas and development being handled by them, while Nintendo would come in periodically to check on things and suggest tweaks here and there to make the game look and feel more like a Mario game. The main concern was that they did not want to make a normal RPG that was simply wearing a Mario skin, which meant that they needed to implement features that only Mario would do, such as jumping and dashing. I realize saying that out loud how weird that probably sounds, but this was 1994 when RPGs were, well, this. Movement in RPGs wasn't exactly the most unique aspect, so to have a hero that could move in 8 directions as well as jump and climb vertically was huge. On the music side, Yoko Shimomura of Street Fighter II fame and eventually Kingdom Hearts fame took the lead. She composed many of the songs in the game, while also incorporating arrangements from Nintendo's own Koji Kondo, as well as arrangements from Square's Nobuo Uematsu, the composer for many Final Fantasy songs. To say that Super Mario RPG had an absolute dynamite music team would be an understatement. Super Mario RPG was only one of a handful of games released in the US to use Nintendo's special SA1 chip. For American and Japanese audiences, this was great because the additional microprocessor allowed for faster access to RAM, more storage space, and even better piracy protection. Unfortunately though, this actually prevented the game from being released in Europe entirely due to the apparent burden of optimizing the chip to work with PAL television sets, as well as translating it into multiple different languages. More on that in a bit though. Releasing in Japan on March 9th, 1996, and then in the US on May 13th of the same year, Super Mario RPG became one of the best-selling games on the Super Nintendo, reaching over 2 million copies sold. By August, in the US alone, it had become the most rented video game 14 weeks in a row. Remember renting video games? Oh, f*** off you. So, how did I come across this game, and what exactly is it? Well, if you've seen my 3 worst puzzles in video games video from a couple years back, you would know that I actually traded a copy of Balls 3D for the Sega Genesis for my copy of Super Mario RPG. You see, there used to be this generically named comic shop near my mom's house called Johnson's, and I used to ride my bike there almost every single day. They eventually started selling video games, so of course I had to buy what I thought was the hottest new game on the market at the time, being Balls 3D. I owned that game for a whopping 2 days before venturing back to Johnson's Comics, only to see that they had a new game in there called Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. Somehow, I managed to convince the owners to trade me back the game they sold me 2 days prior for Super Mario RPG. so it was only by sheer luck and sheer chance that I found and discovered this game as a kid. At the time, I didn't even know what RPG meant. I remember my sister asking me, and I literally told her it was when you could move up, down, left, and right in a game, because that was the only way I knew how to describe them. Regardless though, it went on to absolutely blow me away by showing us an intro with not only memorable music, but a bunch of made up scenes that never actually happened anywhere in the game. Being 10 when I played this, I was absolutely convinced that every single one of these scenes happened somewhere in the game and that I just hadn't found them yet. So I used to hunt for them religiously, especially that scene with Gino coming down and saving you from the Magic Koopa. Because you know, video games would never lie to you, right? Super Mario RPG is just that, a role-playing game. You take the role of Mario in a reimagined version of the Mushroom Kingdom. The game starts off much the same as previous Mario games, with Princess Peach, or well, she was known as Toadstool at the time, being kidnapped by Bowser, and Mario rushing off to rescue her. Upon making your file and watching the opening, you're just tossed right into the game, inside Bowser's castle. You'll see familiar enemies, and being Mario, there's only one thing you're expected to do: jump on them. What the f*** is this? Yep, we have turn-based combat, baby. While the game stays true to the heart of being a Mario game, it is still an RPG, and nothing said RPG in the 90s quite like turn-based combat. While this might turn away some, the system in this game still holds up and has inspired numerous games released afterwards, because you see, this isn't your average turn-based combat. It has timed hits, making for a more immersive and action-oriented experience. When you first enter battle, Mario will look directly at you, the player, while waiting for an action. There are 4 actions conveniently laid out and tied to each of the 4 face buttons on the SNES controller. A attacks, B defends or runs, Y uses special moves, and X is to use items. But it also goes deeper than that. Simply pressing the attack button will result in Mario rushing forward and throwing a punch at the enemy. I know you can punch in Super Mario 64, but there's just something so ridiculous to me about Mario running up and throwing hands. Now it might seem like that's all there is to it, but there's actually a technique that you're shown early on in the game referred to as timed hits. As Mario rushes forward, with careful timing when he throws his first punch, if you press A, Mario will follow it up with another, doing more damage to the enemy. When the enemies get their turn to attack, you can actually apply the same technique. Normally when an enemy attacks you, you just take damage and that's it. However, by using timed hits and pressing the A button just as an enemy attack connects, Mario will guard, lowering the damage taken by said enemy. In 1996, this was mind-blowing, because before Mario RPG, RPGs were still heavily reliant on luck and RNG. While Mario RPG certainly has that as well, it also gives back to the player by letting you influence the battle just a bit more, whether it's doing more damage or receiving less damage. This is also the case with most of the special moves in the game as well, requiring additional action commands to get the most out of each move. It's only a couple of rooms away that you come across Bowser, who has, for some reason, hung the princess above his chandeliers. That sounds way worse than it intended, but I mean, look at her. Like, what was his plan here? After defeating Bowser, the scene quickly changes to a giant sword that comes crashing down into Bowser's keep, throwing our trio off into various directions. Mario is lucky enough to be tossed back into his own house, where Toad is waiting for him. Explaining to Toad that Bowser has yet again kidnapped the princess, Mario rushes back to Bowser's keep, only to be greeted by the giant sword, claiming the castle now belongs to the Smithy Gang, before shattering the bridge, the only entrance into the castle. It's from here that the game truly begins. The journey starts off with Mario trying to find and rescue the princess, wherever she may be. However, as you gather new and unique allies, you eventually learn of an overarching plot involving the Smithy Gang, who shattered the Star Road when they came down. With the Star Road broken, wishes can no longer be granted, so it becomes Mario's task to venture around and find the various star pieces to repair the Star Road, and eventually find and defeat Smithy. Mario gains 4 allies total on his quest, with your battle party consisting of Mario plus 2 other allies of your choosing. Each party member can be equipped with various weapons and armors, and each weapon type has a unique attack animation tied to them. For instance, Mario can use fists, hammers, and shells as weapons. For you Super Smash Bros. Fans out there, if you were ever wondering why people were constantly clamoring for Gino to be a DLC character and where he even came from, well, it's here. And it's because he's awesome. As for the Mushroom Kingdom, you have a world map split into numerous sections. In each section are various stages that Mario needs to journey through to progress. Oftentimes, your path will be blocked by bosses consisting of either Smithy gang members or various other smaller antagonists with their own plot lines that take place simultaneously alongside the main story. The stages are split into numerous screens, presented in an isometric view with various enemies scattered about. As we've already learned, you enter a battle by touching an enemy. That's right, for those of you who aren't fans of random encounters, Mario RPG has you covered. This is also great for people who want to do low-level challenge runs, because you can just avoid the enemies in the game if that's something that interests you. That being said, the combat is really fun, and with the various battle themes they use, it never feels stale. Defeating enemies gives you experience for leveling and coins for buying items and equipment. When you level up, you're given a choice as to which attributes you'd like to increase as well, giving you that much more control over the growth of your characters. There are also numerous towns which of course have various NPCs to interact with and find hidden items in as well. Which, okay, can I just say, this girl is the absolute worst. They put in this little gag where if you walk in front of her, suddenly you stop and she asks Mario, "What you standing in?" From here, you can't do anything. You can't walk, you can't talk to her, you can't open your menu. It's almost as if your game completely froze. The solution is to just jump and then she goes, "Ha, gotcha." But the problem is I was 10 and kind of stupid, so I never understood this. So I would just reset my game thinking it froze and avoid her at all costs. They actually use this gag a couple of times in the game where everything stops and Mario has to like jump to prove who he is, because I guess Mario is the only one capable of jumping? This game is absolutely jam-packed, full of optional things to do. It feels as if each area of the map has at least something you can do, be it returning to the Midas Falls to gather coins and frog coins, participating in the rhythm-themed Yoshi racing games, collecting beetles on Booster Hell. Hell, you can even force Mario to get a job at a hotel.
It's been one of those days.
Which was clearly inspired by this masterpiece. Super Mario RPG even has its own Final Fantasy inspired super boss named Kulex. Here's another child AJ story for you because I know you love them oh so much, but before playing Mario RPG, I'd actually never played a Final Fantasy game. So Kulex's battle theme, being the boss music from Final Fantasy IV, was completely lost on me. In fact, I'd actually gotten it into my head that Kulex was from Final Fantasy I, so I became obsessed with trying to get a copy of Final Fantasy I for the NES. During the summer, I went to a garage sale where I saw a woman selling Final Fantasy I for the NES for $5. Being 10, I didn't have any money, but she said she would hold it for me if I could get the money. So I ran all the way back home to beg my sister to buy me this copy of the game. However, when I returned to where the garage sale was, I couldn't find it. Because you see, she had closed her garage door, and I didn't remember what the house looked like. I also wasn't confident enough to just go around knocking on random strangers' houses asking to buy a copy of Final Fantasy I on the NES. What this meant was that it would be a few more years before I could play Final Fantasy I, only to find out that Kulex was indeed a unique creation for Super Mario RPG. The days before the internet spoiled everything for everyone. Alright, anyway, when it comes to this iteration of the Mushroom Kingdom, Square really knocked it out of the park. From the kingdom itself to the Roseway, over to Moleville and Booster's Tower, Seaside, Monster Town, the Land's End, Nimbus. There are just so many memorable locations. This is purely conjecture on my part, but I do feel like having another company design the Mushroom Kingdom really led to a more interesting set piece. Listen, Nintendo is great and they have made some of my all-time favorite games. However, they also have a habit of playing it a bit too safe from time to time, especially with Mario and especially with the Mushroom Kingdom. So letting another company take the reins of their IP was an absolutely brilliant choice that I would love to see them do more often nowadays. Not to harp on it for too long, but the locations we see here really break the mold, both back then and today, for what you're used to seeing in a Mario game. They made locations that all feel like they flowed naturally into one another, as opposed to trying to shoehorn each biome into the game somewhere. There's no randomly placed Ice World location, there's not even really a desert outside of maybe 3 whole screens at the Land's End, and even that feels more unique than the typical desert we'd see in a Mario game. While Super Mario RPG was exclusive to the SNES, it has seen a couple of re-releases. The Wii's Virtual Console was the first time this game became available in Europe, 12 years after it initially came out. What's this? Oh, the Virtual Console shut down in 2019. But there's still hope, because it also was released on the SNES Classic Edition. Oh, those aren't being manufactured anymore, and are only being sold at an exorbitantly high price from scalpers. But there's still hope. The Wii U eShop. You see, in 2015 and 2016, it was released on the Wii U eShop, which means that it's still available. Oh, come on! So, with the Wii U eShop closing, more on that here, that means this masterpiece of a game is going to be incredibly hard to come by, especially for those of you living in Europe where it never received a physical release, which means that it is essentially being wiped from history. As of recording this video, the Wii U eShop is still open, so I implore you, especially if you're European, to please go download this game if you're interested in playing it. This game not only holds up incredibly well today, but also spawned numerous Mario-themed RPGs, from the Paper Mario series to the Mario and Luigi series, both of which borrow heavily from Super Mario RPG. When I first wrote this script, I went into much deeper detail about this game. I was going to talk about every playable character, all their special moves. I wanted to go into deep detail about all of the bosses. But then I realized that this game was a truly amazing and magical experience for me. And even though it's over 25 years old, I wouldn't want to spoil anybody who hasn't played it yet. There are plenty of people who might not have had an SNES growing up, or maybe you were born after this came out and you're just now discovering retro titles from the 90s. So as opposed to going into every little detail about this game, I thought it'd be more fun to just kind of spread awareness of its existence while it's still relatively available for purchase. If you're a Mario fan, or an RPG fan, or both, then this is a 100% must-buy, must-play experience. I could ramble on and on about how amazing Booster's Tower is, and how Booster's like this weird, dirtier version of Wario somehow, or how Croco is just a pain in the ass that keeps showing up throughout the game, and how I dreaded those fights, but I felt so good beating them. But honestly, there's just so much to this that it's just best to be experienced by just playing the game. Please, begging you, this is unscripted, just go play Mario RPG. It's an amazing game. That being said, my name is AJ, and this was just another video about Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. I recorded this entire video while incredibly sick, and oh my god, I feel like trash. You're welcome.